Welcome, Creative World Building classes. This has been a long time coming, and I apologize for that. But when I started writing this lesson, I was trying to combine two ideas into one, and that would have made a very long lesson, well over a half an hour. So I've decided to cut it into two parts. This first part is scene writing. Now, every book you're going to write is a series of events with characters. And these events are called scenes. Usually they take place in either one location or with one person or group of people doing one thing. For example, one location, a cafe in downtown New York. But another location might be in the cockpit of an airplane, which is moving all over the place, but the location is still the character within the airplane, even if it's moving. Now, why do we write scenes? Not just how, but why do we write a scene? There are four big reasons why. The first, the scene should move the story forward. We just don't want to have a static scene with somebody going, "Hi, Bill, how are you?" "Fine, Nancy, how are you?" "Well, I'm doing well." This is not advancing the story forward, and we've seen that a lot even in published works that we've analyzed. We want to be moving forward without the ordinariness of day-to-day life brought into our story. That doesn't mean ordinary is bad. It just means that people won't pay you for your work if you're writing about how to make a lemon chiffon. Now, the second thing that we want to do for a scene is to establish a character's cause and effect. A cause, something's been done to them. Something has created a conflict, and we've talked about conflict a lot. Well, what is the effect of that conflict? It will probably force a series of reactions out of your character. Now remember, you're the author. You can control what those reactions are. But the character feels that he has to do something. The third is to reveal the consequences of earlier events. This may be where something is happening now and then there is a flashback to tell what has created this. Why is this person in intensive care? And that could be the opening of a book, creates a lot of conflict and drama right off the bat. But now we have to go back and examine how they got into that state. But all three of these pale to the fourth one. This is the important one. You write a scene to make your story easier to follow. How many times have you known where the story is going, but you forget that the reader does not? So, you have to determine how to supply information to the reader, and a scene can do that. Maybe you just don't want to say, Mary was paranoid about rain coming through her roof. Instead, you write a scene where she is increasingly upset because she can hear the rain dripping through on a heavy night. That scene helps convey information about the character. It may also convey information about a cause and effect of actions. Think about a book that's writing about Pearl Harbor. Oftentimes they start with the decision-making process of the Japanese to attack it. And that can be used very dramatically. We go back and see why somebody is thinking about something, and you can give the reader the information through a scene of them contemplating possible actions and coming up with the one you want them to have. Now, something else it does, it gives this information into what I call digestible chunks. We don't want to give too much information to our reader all at once. In a good rejection that I got once, I was told that I had introduced too many characters too quickly to the reader, and that's just one more name to remember. So if a person is not profoundly important to the story, they could just become the waiter or the chauffeur. We don't have to give his name, his family background. We want to make sure that when we give information, it's in small enough pieces that it satisfies the reader's curiosity but also doesn't overload them. That's the 4 good whys of doing a scene. Next, we're going to talk about beginning a scene. How do we start one of these guys? To start a scene, we're going to have to think about the way that we give information again to our reader. We're either going to be describing a place, what we call a setting. We might be describing events, an action of some sort. Or it might be introspective. The character might be going through their own thought process, their doubts, their limitations. Remember when we did that writing prompt where you had to talk to the person in the mirror, and oftentimes you didn't like what the person in the mirror said? Well, that would be a very good scene for establishing emotional intent of the character. So let's go through these, shall we? A setting will create a stunning mental image of a place. Imagine that you have started to talk about climbers. Well, it would be natural to describing the majesty of a mountain range and the insignificant speck of a climber on an ice field up at a high altitude. That will make a very vivid mental image inside your reader's mind. And that is certainly a very definite reason why we want to do it. It also might introduce a place that is otherwise mundane, but very important to the plot. Think about maybe a murder scene in a murder mystery. Think about how we discuss before the murder even occurs that there's only one way out of this room. And that is a very important foreshadowing where we give information before the event happens. We can do that with a setting scene to let everybody know that this room is small, cramped, and there's no way out except that one door. And if the murderer comes in that way, the person inside is trapped. Action. Not just special effects, the kind of action that you see in 21st century movies now, but characters' desires or motivations. Why does somebody go do something very dangerous? Are they altruistic? I must save my nation, tribe, mankind, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. Or maybe they're in a dilemma. If I don't do this action, something bad will happen to somebody I love. And we've seen that in a lot of movies lately where a person is given a choice. There was a movie where the person had to either murder a government official or his child who was kidnapped would be killed. And so he was at a dilemma. He was at a crossroads, and an action scene will set up that dilemma in him very nicely. Third, his thoughts. The mind and beliefs of a character. A lot of Russian writers did this very well. Think about a lot of those 19th century books where they would start, I'm a mean man, I'm a cruel man. Well, this is establishing the character in the very opening scene. And if somebody is mean and cruel, and if they say to themselves that they're sick, you know that there's going to be a lot of action and a lot of conflict. Okay? So once we have gotten an idea to do the scene, how do you design it? Now, there are a lot of ways to do it. Some more old-fashioned than others. Note cards. Nabokov used nothing but note cards. He would have one large note card for an individual scene, and then he would break that scene into several different note cards with individual pieces of information. And that way he could put it on the desk and he could move the scenes around physically to see what happens if he put them in different orders. He wrote many of his books totally on note cards. An outline. I know, that's old-fashioned. Nobody uses outlines anymore. Wrong. Almost nobody uses outlines anymore. But there's still an effective way if you're a more formal thinker, if you like linearity, if you want to go in a straight line from A to B to C. An outline might be the way to do it. I've done some outlines just to get me started. If you're more visual, perhaps you want to do a storyboard. Yes, I know I'm a horrible drawer, but you can see what happens here. There's a confrontation. Looks like, what What do you think that is? A stove, maybe? And then a person reaches for a skillet on the stove and boom, bashes the bad guy on the head before they can be shot, and then the police are investigating him. A storyboard like this is used when you're writing films. The director wants to see an idea of what the shot's going to look like. And since you are basically writing down a film into words, you can use a storyboard effectively. I tried using storyboards, doesn't work very well for me. But the next one does, and it's similar to a storyboard. A written flowchart. The previous scene, I've written out in a flowchart, and I've done entire books like this. You can see in the first block here, it says that an intruder surprises a man cooking dinner. Then the man clonks the intruder on the head with a skillet, and then the police arrive to investigate. This is the one that I use the most, and it is effective for me because it converts what I see in my mind's eye into words that I can work on later. All right? So there are some basic whys and hows of scene building. When you put scenes together, you begin to tell a story. Now, if you tell enough of a story with the hero's journey, where we rise in conflict and then come down off of resolution, you have yourself a novel. I want you to try to write a few scenes together, and then the next video that we'll introduce next week will be about editing those scenes. Now, we've talked a lot about editing, but now we talk about not just the words inside the scene, but does the scene work inside the book? And what can I do to change it? And sometimes the best thing to do to a scene is to cut it. And now you can see why Nabokov used his cards. If he didn't like the scene, he just threw it away. And that was a very easy way for him to get rid of ineffective scenes. I want you to try that, get some writing done, send me an email to let me know what you've done, and I'll be glad to look at it for you, all right? All right, happy writing, and don't forget, 2 pages a day. Thank you very much.